County Executive Anthony Picente in. I want to give him a chance to react. But before you react to the congressman, you are getting some criticism from community activist, community defender. What do we call James Zecca III?
I don't know, but he's, again, he was texting another rhino. I'm assuming he was referring to former Congressman Hanna. Said BS. A lot of BS today. He's very...
A lot of BS about you,
volatile.
Anthony Picente. How do you respond?
How do I respond? Well, which one do you want me to respond to first? First of all, let me say something about Richard Hanna. And I had the pleasure in office and in my career working with Sherry Bollard. That's how I got into politics, working on his first campaign. Mike Arcuri is one of my best friends. Richard Hanna is another good friend. And nobody would, that's the class that we had in that office before this. Jim Zecca, with the rhino. Does everybody know what a rhino is?
I thought it was a mammal.
It's a mammal. Everybody thinks it's but typical Jim Zecca and another follower of Claudia. That let's not work together. Let's call people names. And to call me a rhino, which means Republican in name only, for a guy who's been in more parties than Donald Trump. In their parties.
You're talking about Zecca. Yeah.
And has been a Republican for all of 12 minutes. I've been one for 38 years, and I've got more Republicans elected in my time. And the other thing I'm not is a hypocrite because, I did support a couple Democrats because I support what's right for my community. But I don't do it behind the scenes or hiding in the shadows. And look, my record is my record. I'm proud of it. You want, a guy who changed parties like I change shirts.
And you do change. I bet it's probably 2-3 times a day with your shirts.
That really to criticize me about where my loyalties are and what I believe in. He was a Democrat for it. He ran for controller. Didn't he want to run for city controller as a Democrat? He was on the council as a Democrat, first as an independent. So what are you, Jim? At least I know what I am and I know what I stand for. Tell me what you stand for, because I know what all these people are against. I'd like to know what they're for.
I want to talk about being against something. You sent off quite a letter to FEMA, and obviously we appealed.
Sure.
Apparently, our disaster is not worthy of funding.
No, it's not. And look, it was a little bit of a sarcastic letter in regards to the amount of money that we send, and our allocation, in the FEMA world. And to look at it, and I keep going back to, and then somebody said they put more money in the budget for FEMA. Well, that's all well and good, but if I don't get it, and I say the community,
sure,
then what good is it? I keep going back to when are they going to look at isolated, and when I say isolated, I'm talking about regional storms rather than the whole state or a majority of the state didn't get affected, so it was really something that. There's so many of these storms around that they look at it that then it's eligible.
Yeah.
But if it's only a couple in central New York and Oneida and Madison, Herkimer County, that they can handle it. Well, we can't. And we look to them because that's what we're supposed to do, and that's why they're there.
I guess I never understood that this is almost like insurance, as we pay, as communities around the country pay into FEMA.
And the other thing is, look, and if you don't want to help the governments, which, obviously we had over $10 million. In terms of roads, in terms of bridges, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the expenses we had in cleanup. And, that's one part of it. What about the homeowners? So if you want to shun me, I say, and I mean the government. If you want to shun county government, if you want to shun the towns and the cities, go help the people. But you're not even doing that.
Yeah,
so so don't go tout that, you're there to help. And I get, and I said this before here, that this is not about Florida or Houston or big, those are all disasters that in Puerto Rico that need to be addressed. But what about small communities when they get hammered and relatively the impact is the same? Yeah. Because, when you, relatively speaking, it's like budgets. What impacts our budget is a smaller amount than obviously impacts bigger budgets.
Sure.
So when our streets get flooded,
it's all relative.
It's the same.
Yeah,
it's still the same.
Yeah.
And when homes get destroyed, it's the same.
And for those individual homeowners, it is a disaster equivalent to something that's happened in Florida or Puerto Rico because they've lost everything. Right. So I understand when you add it all together, we don't kind of mount up to what happens in these hurricane states. But at the same time, for that individual homeowner, it's disaster.
Well, I mean, and so I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around is, so what you're saying is FEMA's saying that storm on July 1st or July 4th weekend didn't affect enough counties in New York State. It wasn't a statewide storm, so we're not going to
What they said was, while there were other incidents, they said that the amount of damages to those areas were sufficient that the local governments could handle it. In other words, they were not, it wasn't big enough for them to come in and deal with. Now, had on July 1st there been, according to that logic, 25 counties impacted, so then they would take a look at it or even, provide assistance.
Well, and it's not every...
So my point is, but how do you judge?
Yeah.
How do you judge one disaster over another and then say, well, but it's got to affect more?
Is there any recourse at this point, or it's over?
They
appealed. They rejected.
You only get one shot at the appeal, which
Yeah.
is why I keep saying, come and tell these people that.
Right.
And nobody, and that's the other thing. You just look at it. You just look at it. It's like anything else in government. You look at a ledger sheet and make a determination. It's like, how do you know? Did you talk to us? Mm-hmm. Did you come here? Did you look at the homes? Did you even send anybody
and it's not
down?
every day that you
Did you
have
send anybody to come and take a look and spend a day or two and go through those neighborhoods?
It's not likely that they have these whole states. I mean, it was an anomaly that you had 3-4 enormous storms in 1 year. But I can't imagine that where they usually would help out in years past, it would be a storm of that magnitude.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think, you asked that if New York, off air, if New York was being slighted. I don't think New York gets slighted. I do think the Northeast gets slighted because I do think that there is the perception across, across the states and across the federal government in some areas when it comes to these issues that, well, now they get snow up there all the time.
Right.
They get, they're used to 12 inches at a pop and or more. And when it rains, they got a lot of lakes and rivers up there. So, they can deal with it.
I do wonder sometimes what happens is when these hurricanes tend to hit, we're talking about cities with major population areas. Ultimately, the squeaky wheel always seems to get taken care of, right? And we do not have the population that these big cities have, and I do feel we get slighted because of that.
But look at the amount of damages. That's why I say, send somebody. I mean, nobody even comes and looks at it. Nobody even called me.
If a person loses a home in a city of 7 million people versus a person losing a home in a city of 3,000, the person losing the home feels the same.
It's all relative.
Yeah, it's all relative.
There's no difference in that.
All right, interesting stuff. I appreciate you spending the extra time with us.
I appreciate being here. Unfortunately, and look, we've got when we talk about, just to wrap up, when we talk about, or am I wrapping up, when we talk about, school violence and these things that are happening, I got my State of the County coming up in a couple weeks, and we're going to talk about some of these things in it and what we want to do. But, because there are, and I know the sheriff talked about what's being done, in one school district, but there are other things that, in addition to that, I'd like to take a look at, and to that, I believe we need to as a community.
There was an interesting story in the New York Times last weekend, and I've got to pull it up and talk about it maybe next week. And it really said we are going down and this is New York Times. I understand everybody, the liberal New York Times. New York Times saying the way prohibition, the gun ban philosophy that we have used clearly is not working. The ban on assault rifles clearly did not work. That isn't working. The ban on alcohol didn't work. The ban on this, that, and the other thing doesn't ever seem to work. But if we treated it like we treat the highway system, that has been successful. We've taken the amount of the percentages of accidents on our highways. We have among the safest highways in the world.
Well, but here's the other thing. So, based again on the Congresswoman's comments, because it is relative, these are serious discussions and there are solutions, ultimately. I mean, there's always a solution. I learned that a long time ago.
Right.
Every problem has a solution. It may take you a lot longer to get there, but it's there. But you can't have those serious discussions when you have people who are not serious and who are saying crazy things that distort and distract the real discussions that need to take place. And that's the other thing that's happening here. It's not just about how, what a crazy, pathetic thing was said. It's about, we should be working to fix these things, and we can't because we're wasting all this time answering this nonsense.
A, she makes the hoot owl look sane, to be honest with you. B, the president should send a message and say, because he's able to do this sort of thing. And
the speaker should, too.
Somebody needs to say, you're not making things better.
Right.
All right. I appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you.